Her new book is Room for All of Us, Surprising Stories of Loss and Transformation. The Right Honorable Adrienne Clarkson, our guest, 26th Governor General of Canada. And when I was looking at your resume, you succeeded. There's like, I thought, I can't tell all these people, all the things that you've done.
But a lot of people have lived with me because, you know, I started in television in 1902. And,
yes,
and so
I remember.
a lot of people have followed me along the way, and nothing makes me happier than when people say, I've been watching you since you did Take 30. I love that show. I did a daily show for 10 years, and it was fun. Yes, and I started the Fifth Estate, and it's still going. I'm very happy because it's 36 years, and it's still going as a really great show. And all the same principles operating in it. I'm really happy about that.
But not many people know you wrote a romantic novel.
Ah, two.
Two?
Two. Yes, I did. That was when I was very young.
Well, maybe there's another one to come along. Draft Resistors in this Corky Evans, one who is a familiar name, politician.
to all of you here in BC. And I didn't really know him, but when I was looking around, you see, having lived through all of these events that are the backgrounds for these people coming to Canada, as a journalist, I lived through all these events. I thought, you know, I know about 5 people, and I only want about 8 for this book. And then when I was starting to do the draft thing from the States, I knew Andy Barry from Toronto, and I knew I'll do Andy.
Morning Man.
Yes, the great radio Morning Man, 15 years in Toronto, and about 10 years before that at CFRB, the commercial station in Toronto, and before that at CJAD in Montreal. And then people said, Corky Evans, you got to talk to Corky Evans because, you know, he ran for the leadership twice here in BC, and I felt I had to go to Nelson, BC. So I called Corky and finally answered my phone because he does what he wants to do, you know.
Yes.
And so
I do know.
And then when I came out last year about this time, met with Corky. He introduced me to a bunch of people. Gary Wright in New Denver, who's the mayor of New Denver, who was also a draft dodger. He got together a group of people in his house. And Gary lives in a house in the Orchard, which is where Japanese Canadians were interned, in these little 400 square foot houses. And Gary still lives in one of those. And so I had a most interesting time, and Corky told me his story. And Corky's was the classic story of the draft dodger. You know, riots in Oakland, California, being beaten up by the police, fleeing with his then wife and coming to Canada. Andy was a little different. Andy was a deserter. Andy
and
was
allowed
a deserter.
to desert.
He deserted, and he got in a car with his then girlfriend and later to be his wife, and just drove to Vermont and across the border, and never looked back.
But was Andy the one who thought he needed to tell his commanding officer that he was going to desert?
Yes.
And the commanding officer said, "There's nothing I can do. You can go."
Yeah, he just said.
That was the strangest thing.
Well, I think that showed you how conflicted the Americans were about that war. It was a war which so many people thought was wrong, and because all of these college-educated young men were resisting it because they thought it was a bad war. They didn't see why the Americans were, and they were being drafted into it because they were simply healthy and a certain age, and they just didn't want to go.
Well, in university, if you were a thinking man, you went to joined the ROTC because you could go to Vietnam as an officer rather than a private.
And that's what Andy did. Andy joined the ROTC and went through Dartmouth. On ROTC, and his brother was a career Army officer, had already been in Vietnam, and said, it's a hell of a war, you just have to go, and that's that. And Andy thought, hell no, I won't go. And so he didn't. And he came to Canada, and he immediately was taken, but he said he made a point when he went for his first job about 36 hours after arriving in Canada. He said to the man at CJAD, the commercial station, "I'm a deserter from the United States Army." And the man said, "And what's been your experience in broadcasting?" And just didn't make a thing of it at all. And nothing was ever made of it in Canada. Because we in 1969 declared that anybody's relationship with the military authorities in their own country was their business, and Canada was not interfering with that.
Well, the border guards too were fairly lackadaisical about it. One of them brought the skis or something, said we're going skiing, and never returned.
Yes, that's right, and didn't have any luggage hardly.
Exactly.
And but Andy, you know, when there was an amnesty declared finally under Carter, Andy went back and was discharged from the Army. So that is on his record that he was.
Right.
They went back to various bases. He went to Fort Dix in New Jersey, and he was discharged together with a whole lot of other people who had deserted.
There was one of the resistors, draft dodgers, who said, "I don't want amnesty." When Carter offered amnesty, I can't remember who it was. Said,
"No,
not interested. I'm a Canadian.
Yes,
never going back."
Andy said once he got to Canada and he realized what it was about, he said it was like being a transgendered person, that that he was a Canadian in an American body struggling to get out always, and that he finally found his place, and that he loves it, and he could vote in American elections if he wanted to because he has dual citizenship, but he doesn't. He feels totally and utterly Canadian.
Yes.
And believes that that's what he wants to be. And you know, I would say that of the 40-odd thousand really extraordinary American immigrants we got then, most of them have stayed. And most of them have stayed very true to the kind of ideals they had about what the democratic process is, because when you are 19, 20, 21 years old and you make the decision that you're going to leave your country and maybe you'll never be allowed back, you do a lot of serious thinking.
Very much so.
Yeah, and you decide, I'm going to do this. And then when you come here, you realize it's not exactly like the United States. And you adapt to that and become Canadian.
It's about more than sofas and Chesterfields too, trust me. What was really interesting about this is so many of the immigrants, I think 80% or something of immigrants who come to Canada, if it's that high, want to become citizens.
That's
not
right.
just stay landed immigrants. They want to become citizens sooner rather than later.
It's the highest rate compared, say, to the Americans. It's 65%. People go to the States as landed immigrants, and only 65% take up citizenship. We get this huge take-up, I think, because it's a good country. And I think also because people understand that when they're here, they can become what they would like to become.
Sure.
And that there is an egalitarian society and an operating democratic principle, which is the values of our citizenship. Our citizenship is based on values and not on race and not on religion and that kind of thing. It is based on real group values.
And they also find often a sense of community here, the Ismailis particularly, who, as you know, are very community-oriented and occasionally bend the rules, not in a bad way.
I think all
the story
immigrants
about
lending money to each other.
Yes, or when the immigration authorities say you have to have money in the bank if you're coming here, so they put money in the bank briefly.
Well, they would circulate $10,000, and I think lots of groups do that. But that showed trust among the different families as well. Somebody gives you $10,000 and says, put it in your bank account so that you have that amount of money, and then you give it back and give it to somebody else so that they have $10,000 in their bank. That shows trust in their community. But also, that community spirit of the Ismailis is something that they have brought with them. You see, I object very much to people saying, when people come here out of loss and they have nothing and we have everything and what they want is everything that we have. They don't come with nothing. They come with a strong sense of family and of community and of sharing. And the Ismailis are a great example of this because community and volunteer work is built into their beliefs. And they carry that out. It's not just a religious belief. They carry it out in a secular way. And now they're doing it, expanding it out into their adopted country of Canada. They all volunteer. When I was Governor General, I used to give out the Caring Canadian Award, which was for volunteers. And the youngest volunteers I gave it to were a pair of teenagers, 17 and 18, in Calgary, who were Ismaili and had been volunteering in the community since they were 8 and 9 years old.
Interesting.
Because that's what they're taught to do. This is the way you share your life and creation with
Sure.
other people.
What can Canadian citizens born in Canada, fifth-generation Canadians, learn from these experiences? What should we take from these experiences?
I think what we take from these experiences is that hard work, a public school education to help people acculturate are the things that are going to get you ahead in life. Don't sit around moaning that things aren't the way they used to be, etc. Things are never the way they used to be. And all the kinds of enriching that we get, we have the benefit. When I say there's transformation in this, it isn't just the people who come here who get transformed. It's us, because now we have all these different people with us. We have the world here. We have this advantage of what's called the cosmopolitan ethic. You know, you're in Vancouver, you can come up against anybody in the world. This has been Citizenship Week, and my Institute for Canadian Citizenship has special ceremonies as part of our Building Citizenship program. 50 new citizens come from 29 different countries. That's the average. And we do citizenship ceremonies all the time. And when you see that, when you see the number of countries that people come from and where they're starting from and what they will be, you realize that this is a terribly important stage for us and that we should ignore that at our peril. We should get to know new citizens. We should get involved. I'm making a pitch here. I'd like people to get involved with my Citizenship Institute, because we, for instance, give something called the Cultural Access Pass to all new citizens all across this country for 1 year's free access to cultural institutions.
How great. Art galleries,
everything.
museums.
There's 1,000 institutions, like the Vancouver Art Gallery, the Aquarium, Pier 21, and it's transportable. You could go from here to Calgary and go to the Glenbow. You can go from Calgary to Halifax and go to Pier 21 with this pass with all your family. And it's a way of saying, this is what we are and what we've created as a country. You learn about it. And now we've added Parks Canada, and that's going to be for parks and for all National Historic Sites and monuments.
Great. A pleasure to see you again.
Lovely to see you, Fanny,
Nice
anytime.
to see you. The Right Honourable Adrienne Clarkson, new book, Room for All of Us, Surprising Stories of Loss and Transformation.